Hello and welcome to this new edition of SIASA Talks, the only place where we meet to discuss political situations in this country. We pick certain scenarios and happenings in the political arena and try to place them and give an interpretation of the same into the larger picture of the political destiny of this country. I trust it's been a very good week and happy Madaraka Day. In this edition, we are going to look at a couple of things that have happened in the past week. We will look at the ouster of one Moses Wetangula, and then we will look at the state of NASA, and we will look at the BBI final. But before we go into that, there is a book called The Anthills of the Savannah, written by Chinua Achebe. And this book is based on a story of three individuals, Sam, Chris, and Ikem, both from a fictitious nation called Kangan. These three friends grew up together, and Sam manages to become the de facto president of the nation of Kangan. His friend Chris Oriko is made the information minister in that nation, and Ikem becomes the editor-in-chief of the National Gazette, which was a government-owned press. These two friends, Chris and Ikem, tremendously helped Sam to become president. But once Sam becomes president, he becomes extremely paranoid, and he reaches a place where he starts changing the constitution to give him a life presidency as the leader of Kangan. This draws criticism from Ikem, who continues writing about the dictatorial rule of Sam in his editorial pieces. As Sam is pushing for this agenda of changing the constitution to give him a life presidency, there is only one region of the country called Abazon which refuses to vote into the referendum to change the constitution, so that does not materialize. However, this does not stop Sam from becoming a fully fledged dictator of Kangan. At some point, Chris Oriko is asked by Sam to fire Ikem as the editor-in-chief of the National Gazette, a request that Chris refuses to accept. And anyway, as you always know, government always has its day. Ikem is fired. When Ikem is fired, he goes into private citizenry and continues to criticize the government of Sam. At this point, a government propaganda team is created to fight Ikem. And at one point, they turn around a joke he made about the president making new coins on which his head will be casted to mean that Ikem actually wants the president to be decapitated. At this point, the president does not take this lightly and orders for his arrest and assassination. When Chris hears that his friend Ikem has been assassinated, he bows to pressure and talks to international press and exposes the president Sam as a dictator and a murderer. This puts him in bad light with the president, and he automatically becomes a man on the run. All state organs are directed towards finding Chris. So Chris pairs up with Emmanuel, who was a student of Ikem, and together with Emmanuel's girlfriend, Adama, they disappear from the capital of Kangan to a further region of Abazon to hide. While they are in a bus driving to Abazon, they run into a mob celebrating and chanting with soldiers all over the place, only to realize that these people are actually celebrating the ouster and murder of President Sam. So while in this, Adama is held by some of the soldiers and they want to rape her. And so Chris intervenes and he's shot by one of the soldiers and dies. In the end, only Emmanuel and Adama go back to the capital of Kangan to break the sad news to Chris' wife. What does this story teach us? That is how power and that is how politics works. So in politics, there is no friendship. People say in politics, there is no permanent friends and permanent enemies. But I will tell you today, in politics, there's no friends. There's no friendship in politics. It's all about getting it and having it all. So that is what exactly we are seeing in the situation in our country. Power has to be taken and power has to be protected at all costs. So the happenings that are going around are not new. These are things that define what political power is all about. Now let's look at the ouster of Wetangula. I looked at the events of the ouster of Wetangula, and I could not understand a simple point. And this is, Wetangula did not understand who was fighting him out of Ford, Kenya, and what was the end game of that. Wetangula, it's very clear Wetangula is not being fought by Seli Simiyu, his Secretary General, but is being fought by forces that need to change the political inclination, the political setup of Western Kenya, the larger Western Kenya. It has become very clear that Musalia Mudavadi is no longer a man befitting the title of the Luhya Kingpin or the Kingpin of Western Kenya. So there is frantic efforts to have him replaced. And when there are these forces that want him to be replaced, you will look at who are the people that are possibly being put in that direction. You will look at people like Governor Oparanya, who is doing his last term as a governor. Look at the former governor and now the Speaker of the Senate, Ken Lusaka. Look at CS Eugene Wamalwa, and look at Mukisa Kitui. These are people that are coming back into the Luhya political space. When you narrow down to Eugene Wamalwa, Mukisa Kitui, and Ken Lusaka, you'll realize one thing. They do not have a party, but they are coming with a bang back into the elective politics of Western Kenya. So these are actually the people who want Wetangula out, and that's a formidable force, and sadly, they have the blessing of the system. So whether Wetangula goes to court or the political parties tribunal, he will have to leave this seat for the rightful occupants to come in. It's been very clear up to this point, Wetangula and Mudavadi are not fully in support of the BBI or are not really going the BBI direction, but they have been seen to be courting a friendship with William Ruto. William Ruto at the moment is a besieged man, and anybody that associates with William Ruto must be punished for that matter. And now this is their moment, and it is coming. Not very far from now, you will hear an onslaught. You will hear that Musalia Mudavadi has been removed from ANC as the party leader. It's very possible, because in all these parties, all the powers of choosing the head of the party have been vested in the National Executive Council. And in these parties, the Secretary General is a very influential person. So if the Secretary General, according to the constitution of all these political parties, calls for a neck and makes a decision, it stands. So on Tuesday morning, Wetangula will wake up to a gazette notice of the changes that were made in the party, and this will be shared with the Registrar of Political Parties for amendments. And by the time Wetangula is waking up to run to the Tribunal of Political Parties, there's nothing much the tribunal can do, because all these powers to make changes within parties are vested in the National Executive Councils of these parties. So that is how simple Wetangula will get out of that seat. What is the end game in all this? The end game in all this is to isolate both Musalia Mudavadi and Wetangula in the larger Western region. They will be the only two individuals standing in support of William Ruto, because the other MPs that are aligned to William Ruto's side, like Didmas Baraza and Honorable Washali, are not as influential as the two. As it were, if you look at it from this perspective, NASA is already is already a dissolved party, or a dissolved coalition for that matter. Musalia Mudavadi has given an excuse of not going into a coalition with any other party because the pact within NASA coalition still stands. But the other day, the treasurer of ODM, which is the biggest party in the NASA affiliation of parties, said that ODM owes nothing to these other parties that were affiliates of NASA, that their pact was to drive them into the power, and that is where they would have shared whatever they got. But now that they didn't get anything, they have nothing to share and they owe nobody anything. So clearly, NASA is done. And then number two, Wiper has gone into a pact with Jubilee to work together. And you see, ODM has also signed a cooperation deal with Jubilee, though not in writing, but ideally it so exists, so it is. So Jubilee, Wiper is out, ODM is out. What do you say? Musalia Mudavadi is standing alone. So it is just a matter of time that he realizes that there is no longer NASA, and he decides wholeheartedly. But as we know him, he's a man who will sit on the fence until the last minute. So clearly the end game in this ouster of Wetangula is to isolate the two leaders, Musalia Mudavadi and Wetangula, in their defiance, so that by the time the strong wind of change is blowing, they will not stand. The meeting between Dr. Eseli Sumeyu, Wafula Wamunyinyi, and Eugene Wamalwa under the auspices of Raila Amolo Odinga was not in vain. And then it was followed by the meeting in Kajiado at Atwoli's residence. Those two meetings were not in vain. And those two meetings are to dethrone the two and to isolate them and to drive them into political oblivion, so that after 2022, you will not hear of them anymore. And new leaders are going to be brought up in Western Kenya, and they will command that region like never before. These leaders we are having in mind is people like Eugene Wamalwa, people like Speaker of the Senate Ken Lusaka, people like Mukisa Kitui. They are coming back and they're coming with a bang. But when you look at the arrangement, whose support are they having? And it is very clear that BBI is the deal. And anybody that stands in the way of the BBI stands no political future. So those who stand in the way to it are doing it at their own peril. If you like these discussions and you would like to remain as part of this community, kindly subscribe to this channel. You can also like, drop a comment, and also share to people of like minds. Till next time, goodbye.